Could a lower corporate tax rate and a more competitive international treatment of our U.S. companies reverse this trend by making America a more attractive place to invest in?
So I think this is an important question for Congress to consider and to review all of the analysis that's been done on this topic. I would say there is widespread concern that the current structure of the corporate tax system does have the effects that you have indicated, but looking at the likely impact of particular proposals that may be under consideration is something that we haven't done carefully at the Federal Reserve, and I would leave it to members of Congress and the administration to judge what the likely consequences would be.
Okay, thank you. One other question. A major criticism in some quarters of Dodd-Frank has been the regulatory burden that it has placed on small banks in particular. There's a legislative initiative that would raise the $500 billion to $250 billion, the regulatory threshold for heightened oversight by the Federal Reserve. Do you agree that overly burdensome regulations has hindered particularly small bank lending to the effect of contributing to maybe the slowness of that economic recovery that we've both talked about from the last recession?
Well, I do agree that community banks face substantial burdens, regulatory burdens, and it's very appropriate for the Fed and other banking regulators to look for ways to reduce the compliance burdens that they face. We are I know we meet with many community bankers and are very aware of concerns about this. We are really focused on trying to tailor our supervision so that we find ways to reduce regulatory burdens. We have put into effect a number of changes that reduce reporting requirements, and recently have a simplified capital proposal that we think should address some of the concerns. But we have long been on record as favoring some increase in the $10 and $50 billion asset thresholds that are incorporated into Dodd-Frank. In particular, we think that the Volcker rule and incentive compensation are things that should not apply to smaller, less complex banks. And we do think an increase in those thresholds would assist us in appropriately tailoring our regulations. We do think it's important that the Fed retain authority to impose enhanced prudential standards on banking firms, particularly in the $100 to $250 billion total asset range, both for safety and soundness and financial stability concerns. And in particular, stress testing, we think is a particularly important component of our safety and soundness approach, and do think it's appropriate for that to apply to banks, let's say, over the $100 billion threshold.